Captain Vextar's 6 eyes studied the viewing screen with growing interest. The bridge of the Zalathi warship Dominion's Edge hummed with quiet efficiency as his crew worked at their stations. Outside, the endless void of space stretched in, all directions, broken only by distant stars and the faint glow of nebulae. "Captain," called out Navigation Officer Kethra from her station, "we have detected an unknown vessel at the edge of our scanning range." Vextar turned his massive head toward her. His species, the Zalathi, stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick, armored skin that had evolved on a high-gravity world. 4 powerful arms ended in clawed hands, and their natural armor could stop most small weapons. They had been the dominant military force in this sector of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. "Display it on the main screen," Vexitar ordered. The image that appeared showed a small, oddly shaped vessel drifting slowly through space. It was clearly artificial, but its design was unlike anything in their databases. The ship appeared to be made of simple metal alloys with what looked like primitive chemical thrusters attached to its rear section. "Interesting," muttered Science Officer Zalnex as he studied his readings. "The vessel appears to be from an unknown species. Preliminary scans suggest basic technology levels." Vexitar leaned back in his command chair. As captain of one of the Confederation's most advanced scout vessels, he had encountered dozens of primitive species over his long career. Most followed a predictable pattern. They would either surrender immediately when faced with superior technology, or make a brief, futile attempt at resistance before being crushed. "Any signs of advanced weapons or shielding?" he asked. "Negative, Captain," Zalnex replied. "The vessel appears to use simple metal hull plating with no energy shields detected. Weapon systems appear to be kinetic-based projectile launchers. Quite primitive." The bridge crew exchanged knowing looks, another easy conquest for the Confederation. Vextar had overseen the subjugation of 17 different species, and this looked like it would be number 18. "Begin a deep scan of the vessel," Vextar commanded. "I want to know everything about this species before we make contact. Their technology level, biological characteristics, population centers, everything." "Yes, Captain," Zalnex said, his fingers dancing across his control panel. "Initiating deep scan now." The Dominion's Edge was equipped with the most advanced scanning technology in the Confederation fleet. Their deep scan arrays could penetrate most known materials and analyze everything from atomic structure to biological functions. It was a tool that had given them a decisive advantage over countless primitive worlds. On the screen, invisible beams of energy reached out toward the unknown vessel. The ship appeared to be completely unaware of their presence, drifting slowly on its current course without any change in speed or direction. "Scan penetration successful," Zalnex reported. "Beginning analysis of the vessel's construction and contents." Vextar watched as data began flowing across the various screens around the bridge. The unknown ship measured roughly 400 meters in length, much smaller than even their lightest combat vessels. Its hull appeared to be made of steel alloys with some kind of ceramic coating, clearly primitive materials compared to their own crystalline metal composite armor. Initial biological scans show the presence of approximately 200 life forms aboard the vessel, Zalnex continued. The beings appear to be bipedal, averaging about 1.8 meters in height, much smaller than our species. Communications Officer Veltar looked up from her station. "Captain, should I prepare first contact? Protocols?" "Not yet," Vextar replied. "Let's learn more about what we're dealing with first." The deep scan continued, revealing more details about the mysterious vessel and its occupants. The beings inside appeared to be carbon-based life forms, similar to many species they had encountered before. They seemed to breathe a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere and showed signs of being warm-blooded mammals. "Fascinating," Zalnex muttered as he studied the incoming data. These creatures appear to have originated from a world with relatively low gravity and a thin atmosphere. Their bone density is much lower than ours, and their muscle mass suggests they would be quite weak in a physical confrontation. Vextar nodded approvingly. Physical weakness was common among primitive species. Most had evolved on easier worlds, and never developed the natural strength and armor that came from surviving on harsh planets like the Zalathi homeworld. "What about their technology?" he asked. "Primitive, but functional," Zalnex replied. "They appear to use chemical combustion for propulsion, basic electronics for ship systems, and kinetic projectile weapons for armament. I would estimate their technology level at approximately level 2.3 on our scale. Level 2.3 was barely above stone tools. The Zalathi considered themselves to be at level 8.7, with theoretical level 10 representing perfect mastery of physical laws. A species at level 2.3 would pose no threat whatsoever to their advanced fleet." "Excellent," Vextar said with satisfaction. "Continue the deep scan. I want complete biological and technological profiles before we proceed." The scanning beams penetrated deeper into the unknown vessel, analyzing its internal structure and systems. The ship appeared to be divided into multiple sections, with what looked like living quarters, work areas, and some kind of command center. The beings inside appear to follow a hierarchical social structure, Zalnex observed. There are clear distinctions in their quarters and duties. Some appear to be leaders, while others are clearly subordinates. Standard for most primitive species, Vextar noted. They probably still organize themselves along tribal lines. "Captain," Veltar called out from the communications station, "I'm detecting radio emissions from the vessel. They appear to be using electromagnetic communications. Can you decode their transmissions?" "Working on it now, sir. Their communication patterns are relatively simple. I should have a basic translation matrix ready within a few minutes." Vextar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. Another primitive species, another easy victory for the Confederation. Soon, this new race would join the dozens of others working in their factories and mines, grateful for the privilege of serving their Zalathi masters. "Sir," Zalnex said, looking up from his console with some confusion, "I'm detecting some unusual readings from their computer systems." "What kind of unusual readings?" "Well, their data storage systems are quite primitive, but they seem to contain an enormous amount of information. Far more than would be expected for a vessel of this size and technology level." Vextar frowned. "What kind of information?" "I'm still analyzing, but it appears to be historical records, technical manuals, and what look like tactical databases." "Tactical databases?" Vextar repeated. "You mean military information?" "Yes, sir. Extensive military information. Records of battles, weapon specifications, strategic planning documents. The amount of data is quite remarkable for such a primitive species." This was unusual. Most primitive species they encountered had little in the way of organized military knowledge. They might have basic warriors or hunters, but detailed tactical databases suggested a more sophisticated understanding of warfare than their technology level indicated. "Continue the analysis," Vextar ordered. "I want to know more about these military records." As the deep scan progressed, more details emerged about the mysterious vessel and its occupants. The beings inside appeared to live in a highly organized society with complex social structures. Their technology might be primitive, but their social organization seemed surprisingly advanced. "Captain," Veltar announced, "I've completed the initial translation matrix. I can now understand their basic communications." "What are they saying?" "Most of it appears to be routine operational communications. Status reports, duty assignments, technical discussions, nothing that suggests they've detected our presence." "Good. What about their language structure?" "Surprisingly complex, sir. They appear to have a highly developed communication system with multiple layers of meaning, much more sophisticated than we would expect from a level 2.3 species." Vexitar's frown deepened. Nothing about this contact was following the usual pattern. Primitive species typically had simple languages, basic social structures, and minimal military organization. These beings seemed to have advanced versions of all three while maintaining primitive technology. "Sir," Zalnex called out urgently, "you need to see this." "What is it?" "I've been analyzing their historical records. Captain, these beings have been engaged in almost constant warfare for their entire recorded history." "Warfare with other species?" "No, sir. Warfare with each other. According to these records, they've been fighting among themselves for thousands of years." Vextar moved to stand behind Zalnex's station, studying the data flowing across the screen. What he saw was disturbing, page after page of military records, battle reports, and casualty figures. This species seemed to spend more time fighting than most civilizations spent on anything else. "How many conflicts are we talking about?" he asked. "Thousands, sir. Major wars, minor conflicts, brief skirmishes. They seem to fight constantly. And the scale of some of these battles—" Zalnex paused, rechecking his readings. "Sir, some of these conflicts involved millions of casualties." "Millions?" Vextar couldn't hide his surprise. "That can't be right. Check your translation matrix." "I've checked it 3 times, sir. The numbers are correct. They've fought wars that killed millions of their own kind." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. A species that could wage war on such a massive scale against itself was unprecedented. Most primitive species might have small tribal conflicts, but nothing approaching the scale Zalnex was describing. "What kinds of weapons were they using?" Vextar asked quietly. "That's the disturbing part, sir. Even with their primitive technology, they've developed incredibly efficient methods of killing. Chemical weapons, biological agents, explosive devices, kinetic bombardment. They seem to have turned warfare into a science." Vexatar stared at the data streaming across the screen. Each entry represented thousands or millions of deaths, and there were thousands of entries. This single species had killed more of their own kind than the Zalathi had killed in all their conquest campaigns combined. "Captain," Veltar called out nervously, "I'm detecting some changes in their communications patterns." "What kind of changes?" "They appear to be running some kind of system checks, testing their sensors and weapon systems." Vextar's blood ran cold. "Do they know we're here?" "I don't think so, sir. It appears to be routine maintenance, but..." "But what?" "Sir, their weapon systems are more advanced than we initially thought. The scan shows they're not just simple kinetic projectiles. They have guided missiles, energy-based point defense systems, and what appears to be some kind of magnetic acceleration technology." The pieces were starting to come together, and Vextar didn't like the picture they were forming. This wasn't just another primitive species. These beings had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare, and their technology, while primitive by Confederation standards, was specifically designed for one purpose: killing as efficiently as possible. "Sir," Zalnex said quietly, "there's something else. I've been analyzing their ship's designation and purpose." "What about it?" "According to their records, this vessel is classified as a light patrol ship. It's not even considered a warship by their standards." The bridge fell completely silent. If this was just a patrol ship, what did their actual warships look like? "Captain," Veltar whispered, "should we abort the contact mission?" Vextar stared at the small vessel on the screen. It looked so harmless, drifting through space with its primitive metal hull and simple chemical thrusters. But the data they had gathered painted a very different picture. These weren't primitive savages waiting to be conquered. These were apex, predators who had spent millennia learning how to kill more efficiently. "Continue the deep scan," he ordered finally. "I need to know everything about this species before we make any decisions." The unknown vessel continued its slow drift through space, apparently unaware of the Zalathi ship studying it. But Captain Vextar was beginning to suspect that appearances could be very deceiving when it came to this strange new species. The deep scan of the human vessel had been running for 2 hours now. Captain Vextar remained on the bridge, unwilling to leave while such disturbing information continued to flow from their analysis systems. What had started as a routine first contact mission was becoming something much more complicated. "Captain," Science Officer Zalnex called out, his voice carrying a note of concern. "The deeper we scan, the more unusual this becomes." "What have you found now?" Vexatar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "I've been analyzing their computer databases more thoroughly. Sir, these beings don't just fight wars, they study warfare. They have detailed analyses of every conflict they've ever been involved in, going back thousands of years." Vextar moved to look over Zalnex's shoulder at the data flowing across his screen. What he saw made his stomach turn. Page after page of tactical analysis, strategic planning, and detailed studies of how to kill more efficiently. "Look at this," Zalnex pointed to a section of data. "This appears to be an analysis of a battle where they surrounded and destroyed an enemy force. But instead of just recording the victory, they've studied every aspect of the engagement. What worked, what didn't work, how they could do it better next time. That's..." Vextar paused, trying to find the right words. "That's remarkably sophisticated for a primitive species." "It gets worse, sir. They don't just study their victories. They study their defeats even more carefully. Look at this record here. They lost a major battle, suffered heavy casualties, but instead of mourning their dead and moving on, they analyzed exactly why they lost and developed new tactics to prevent it from happening again. The implications were chilling. Most species, when faced with defeat, would either surrender or flee. These humans seemed to treat defeat as a learning opportunity, a chance to become better at warfare." "What about their current military situation?" Vextar asked. "Are they currently at war?" "Not exactly, sir. But that might be even more disturbing." "Explain." "According to their records, they've achieved something called planetary unity relatively recently. All the major factions on their homeworld have stopped fighting each other and formed a single government. That's good news, isn't it?" "You would think so, sir. But look at what they've been doing since achieving peace." Zalnex pulled up another section of data. "They've taken all their military knowledge and experience and created something they call joint forces. Instead of having separate armies that fight each other, they've combined all their military expertise into a single unified force." Vextar felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean they've taken thousands of years of warfare experience and combined it all into one military organization?" "Exactly, sir. And they've been using their peacetime to develop new weapons and tactics. Look at these training exercises they conduct. They simulate massive battles involving millions of soldiers, testing new strategies and weapon systems." The data showed elaborate war games where human forces practiced fighting enemies with superior technology. They ran scenarios where they were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing impossible odds. And in many cases, they found ways to win anyway. "Sir," Communications Officer Veltar interrupted. "I've been monitoring their internal communications more closely. There's something you need to hear." "What is it?" "They're discussing something called first contact protocols. They appear to have detailed plans for what to do if they encounter alien species." Vextar's blood ran cold. "They have first contact protocols? How could a primitive species have developed those?" "I don't know, sir. But listening to their discussions, they seem to have considered multiple scenarios. Peaceful contact, hostile contact, technologically superior aliens, technologically inferior aliens. They've thought through dozens of different possibilities. Play me a sample of their communications." Veltar adjusted her controls, and the bridge was filled with sounds of the human language. Even through the translation matrix, Vextar could hear the calm, professional tone of the voices. Navigation reports all systems normal, sensor array operating at full efficiency. Weapons systems on standby, ready for immediate activation if needed. Copy that. Tactical, what's our current readiness status? All weapon systems checked and ready. Point defense grid is online. Missile tubes loaded and ready to fire on command. We can go from standby to full combat readiness in 37 seconds. Good. Keep monitoring all sensor readings. If anything unusual shows up, I want to know about it immediately. The communications ended, and the bridge fell silent. 37 seconds from standby to full combat readiness. That was faster than most Zalathi warships could manage. Captain, Zalnek said quietly, I don't think this is a peaceful exploration vessel. What do you mean? Look at the crew composition. I've been analyzing the biological scans of the individuals aboard that ship. Every single one of them shows signs of extensive physical training. These aren't scientists or explorers. These are soldiers. Vextar studied the biological data. The humans aboard the vessel showed muscle development consistent with intensive physical conditioning. Their bone density was higher than normal for their species, suggesting they regularly engaged in high-stress activities. Most telling of, all, their brain scans showed neural patterns consistent with extensive combat training. They're all warriors, Vextar breathed. Every single one, sir, and not just basic warriors. Look at their psychological profiles. The data was disturbing. Each human on the vessel showed psychological conditioning designed to handle extreme stress, violence, and life-threatening situations. They had been trained to remain calm and functional, even when facing death. Sir, Veltar called out urgently, their communications are changing. They're starting to use what appears to be coded language. Can you decode it? Working on it, sir, but it's quite sophisticated. They appear to be switching to military. Communication protocols! Vexitar felt sweat beginning to form on his armored skin. Military communication protocols meant they suspected something was wrong. But how could they know about the Zalathi presence? Zalnex, could they have detected our scans? Impossible, sir. Our scanning technology is completely passive. There's no way a level 2.3 species could detect it. Then why are they switching to military protocols? Before anyone could answer, Veltar spoke up again. Sir, I've partially decoded their new communications. They're conducting what they call a stealth sweep. A what? They're using their sensors to scan for what they call unusual energy signatures and passive scanning attempts. Sir, I think they know we're here. The bridge erupted in nervous chatter as the crew began to grasp the implications. A primitive species had somehow detected their advanced scanning systems and was now actively looking for them. How is that possible? Vextar demanded. I don't know, sir, Zalnex replied, frantically checking his instruments. According to everything we know about their technology level, they shouldn't be able to detect our presence. Unless, Veltar said quietly, their technology level isn't what we think it is. What do you mean? Sir? I've been analyzing their equipment more carefully. Yes, they use chemical propulsion and metal hull construction. But look at how they use these primitive technologies. Veltar transferred her analysis to the main screen. What appeared showed technical specifications that were remarkably sophisticated, despite being based on primitive materials. Their chemical propulsion system is incredibly efficient. She continued. They've squeezed every possible bit of performance out of basic physics, and their metal hull construction uses layered armor techniques that I've never seen before. It's like, Zalnex added, studying the data, they've taken primitive technology and refined it to absolute perfection. But why would they do that? Vextar asked. Why not develop more advanced technology? Maybe they did, sir, Veltar said quietly. Maybe this is just what they use for their patrol ships. The implications hit everyone at once. If this was the technology they used for routine patrols, what did their actual military vessels look like? Captain, the navigation officer called out, the alien vessel is changing course. All eyes turned to the main screen. The human ship, which had been drifting slowly on a steady course, was now turning. Its movement was slow and deliberate. like a predator that had caught the scent of prey. "They're turning toward us," navigation reported unnecessarily. "How can they know where we are?" Vextar demanded. "We're completely cloaked." "Sir," Zalnex said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I don't think our cloak is as effective as we thought it was." "What?" "I've been analyzing the data from their sensors. They're not using the kind of active scanning we expected. They're using passive detection methods that I don't fully understand. It's like they're looking for shadows in space, disruptions in background radiation, gravity fluctuations." "That's impossible. That would require incredibly sophisticated detection algorithms." "Yes, sir, it would. The kind of algorithms that a species would develop if they'd spent thousands of years fighting wars where the ability to detect hidden enemies meant the difference between life and death." The human vessel continued its slow turn until it was facing directly toward the Zalathi ship. Even though they were still too far away to see each other visually, there was no doubt that the humans knew exactly where the Dominion's edge was located. "Captain," Veltar reported, her voice shaking slightly, "I'm detecting changes in their weapon systems. They're powering up." "All weapons?" "No, sir. Just their defensive systems. Point defense grids, anti-missile systems, close-range weapons. It's like they're preparing for us to attack them." Vexitar stared at the screen showing the human vessel. It looked so small and primitive compared to his massive warship. But everything they had learned suggested that appearances were deceiving when it came to this species. "Sir," Zalnex said urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy spikes from their computer systems. They're running what appears to be combat simulations." "Combat simulations?" "Yes, sir. They're running dozens of scenarios simultaneously. Different attack patterns, various enemy ship configurations, multiple tactical responses. It's like they're preparing for every possible way we might attack them." "How long have they been running these simulations?" "According to the data, sir, they started the moment they detected our presence." The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. While the Zalathi had been studying the humans had been studying them right back. And more importantly, they had been preparing to fight. "Captain," Veltar whispered, "what are your orders?" Vextar stared at the human vessel on the screen. Everything about this first contact had gone wrong. What should have been a simple encounter with a primitive species had turned into a potential military engagement with unknown opponents who seemed to know far more about warfare than their technology level suggested. "Continue monitoring their communications," he ordered finally, "and prepare our own weapons systems for defensive action only." "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "shouldn't we power up our offensive systems as well?" Vextar considered this for a moment. Standard doctrine called for overwhelming force when dealing with primitive species, but nothing about this situation was standard. "No," he decided, "defensive systems only. I have a feeling that if we power up our offensive weapons, they'll take it as a sign that we're planning to attack." "And if they attack us first, sir?" Vextar looked at the data they had gathered. A species that had spent thousands of years perfecting warfare, who treated defeat as a learning opportunity, who had trained every member of their military to remain calm under extreme stress. "Then," he said quietly, "we'll find out just how good we really are." Captain Vextar ordered his science team to work around the clock analyzing the human vessel. What they discovered over the next several hours shattered everything the Zalathi thought they knew about primitive species. "Captain," Zalnex called out, his voice strained from hours of continuous work, "I've completed the analysis of their tactical databases." "Sir, what I've found is beyond anything we've encountered before." "Show me," Vextar said, though he dreaded what he might learn. The main screen filled with human military data. Charts, graphs, battle plans, weapon specifications, and tactical analyses covered every available pixel of space. "The humans don't just fight wars, sir. They study warfare like we study science. Look at this section here. They call it asymmetric warfare." What does that mean? It means fighting enemies who are stronger than you are. They have detailed strategies for defeating superior forces using inferior technology. They've developed dozens of different approaches: guerrilla tactics, resource denial, psychological warfare, strategic deception. Vextar studied the data with growing unease. Page after page of strategies designed specifically for defeating technologically superior enemies. It was as if the humans had been preparing for this exact situation. "This can't be right," he muttered. "These tactics assume fighting enemies with better weapons, better armor, better technology. How could they develop such strategies?" "That's the disturbing part, sir. According to their historical records, they developed these tactics fighting each other. Some of their nations or tribes would have better technology than others, so the weaker groups learned how to compensate." "You mean they've been practicing fighting superior forces for thousands of years?" "Exactly, sir. And they got very good at it. Look at these battle records. Time after time, technologically inferior human forces defeated superior ones using these tactics. The implications were staggering. While the Zalathi had dominated their sector by relying on superior technology and overwhelming force, the humans had spent millennia learning how to fight enemies who were stronger than they were. "What about their weapons development?" Vexitar asked. "That's even more disturbing, sir. They don't just develop weapons to fight their current enemies. They develop weapons to fight potential future enemies." Zal next brought up another section of data showing human weapon development over time. The progression was methodical and relentless. "Look at this pattern, sir. Every time they encounter a new type of defense, they develop weapons specifically, designed to counter it. Energy shields lead to kinetic penetrators. Kinetic armor leads to energy weapons. Electronic countermeasures lead to hardened electronics." "They adapt," Vextar said quietly. "More than that, sir. They anticipate. Look at these weapon systems they've developed but never used. They've created weapons for enemies they haven't even met yet." The data showed research into exotic weapons designed to counter theoretical defenses. Weapons that could bypass energy shields, penetrate any known armor, or disrupt technological systems. The humans had imagined dozens of different types of alien technology and developed counters for each one. "Captain," Veltar interrupted from the communications station, "I've been monitoring their internal discussions more closely. They're talking about something called escalation doctrine. What is that?" "From what I can understand, it's their policy for dealing with superior enemies. If they can't match an enemy's technology, they escalate the conflict in other ways." "Explain." "They increase the scale of the fighting, bring in more forces, target civilian populations, use chemical or biological weapons, destroy infrastructure. Basically, they make the cost of victory so high that their enemies give up." Vextar felt a chill run through his body. "They would attack civilian targets?" "According to their records, sir, they've done it before. Many times. When facing superior enemies, they target supply lines, manufacturing centers, population centers, anything that supports the enemy war effort." "That's..." Vextar struggled to find words. "That's barbaric." "Perhaps, sir. But it's also effective. Their records show multiple conflicts where technologically superior forces withdrew rather than pay the price for total victory." The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. The Zalathi code of warfare emphasized honor, direct confrontation, and minimal civilian casualties. The idea of deliberately targeting non-combatants was repugnant to their warrior culture. "Sir," Zalnek said quietly, "there's more. I've been analyzing their current military organization." "Go ahead." "They've structured their forces around something they call distributed command. Instead of having a central command that controls everything, they've created multiple independent units that can operate on their own." "Why would they do that?" "So that destroying their command structure doesn't stop their military from functioning. Even if we eliminated their leadership, their individual units would continue fighting independently." The tactical implications were disturbing. Zalathi military doctrine relied heavily on command hierarchies. Eliminate the leadership, and the entire force would collapse. The humans had apparently learned from this weakness and designed their military to function without central control. What about their ship design? Vextar asked. We classified it as a primitive patrol vessel. That classification may have been premature, sir. I've been studying their engineering more carefully. Zalnex brought up detailed schematics of the human vessel. What had initially appeared to be simple construction now revealed layers of sophisticated engineering. Their hull design uses something called layered defense, multiple types of armor designed to defeat different kinds of weapons. The outer layer is designed to disperse energy weapons. The middle layer stops kinetic projectiles. The inner layer protects against radiation and biological weapons. 3 different armor types on one ship? Yes, sir. And that's just the passive. Defenses. They also have active countermeasures, electronic warfare systems, and what appears to be some kind of adaptive shielding. Adaptive shielding? Their shields can change configuration depending on the type of attack they're facing. Energy weapons trigger one response, kinetic weapons trigger another, and so on. Vextar stared at the technical specifications. This wasn't primitive technology. This was technology specifically designed by a species that expected to fight enemies with superior capabilities. Captain, the navigation officer called out, the human vessel is moving again. On the main screen, the human ship was beginning a slow, complex maneuver. It wasn't moving directly toward or away from the Zalathi vessel, but instead following a curved path that kept changing direction. What are they doing? Vexitar asked. Unknown, sir, navigation replied. But their movement pattern doesn't match any standard navigation we're familiar with. Sir, Veltar added from communications. I'm detecting increased activity in their computer systems. They appear to be running more combat simulations. What kind of simulations? Multiple attack scenarios, sir, but also escape routes, evasive maneuvers, and what appears to be some kind of tactical withdrawal patterns. Vextar watched the human ship's erratic movement with growing understanding. They're not just running simulations, they're implementing them. Sir? Look at their movement pattern. They're testing different evasive maneuvers while simultaneously planning multiple response scenarios. They're preparing for any possible action we might take. Captain, Zalnex said urgently, I'm detecting energy buildups in their weapon systems, but it's not what we expected. What do you mean? They're not powering up their main weapons, sir. They're charging their point defense systems and what appears to be some kind of electronic warfare equipment. Electronic warfare? Systems designed to disrupt enemy sensors, communications, and targeting systems. If they activate these systems, we could lose our ability to scan them or coordinate our own weapons. The tactical situation was becoming more complex by the minute. The humans weren't preparing for a direct confrontation. They were preparing to neutralize the Zalathi's technological advantages while positioning themselves to escape or counterattack. Sir, Veltar reported, I'm detecting changes in their communication patterns again. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. Are they trying to communicate with us? I don't think so, sir. It appears to be some kind of automated system. They're transmitting data packets on dozens of different frequencies using various protocols. What kind of data? I'm not sure, sir. The transmission is heavily encrypted, but the volume of data suggests they're sending detailed information about our vessel, our weapons, our current position. Sending it where? Veltar's face went pale. I think they're sending it to other human ships, sir. The bridge fell completely silent. If the humans were reporting their encounter to other vessels, this was no longer an isolated first contact situation. Other human ships would know about the Zalathi presence, their capabilities, and their current location. How many other ships might be out there? Vextar asked quietly. Unknown, sir, Zalnex replied. But if this vessel is truly just a light patrol ship, as their records indicate, there could be much larger vessels nearby. And now they know exactly where we are and what we're capable of. Yes, sir, and based on their tactical doctrines, they're probably already planning how to defeat us. Vextar studied the human ship on the screen. It was still performing its complex evasive maneuvers, while simultaneously broadcasting data about the Zalathi vessel to unknown recipients. Everything about the situation suggested a level of tactical sophistication that far exceeded what their technology level indicated. "Captain," his weapons officer called out, "request permission to charge our main weapons systems." "Denied," Vextar replied immediately. "Sir, if we charge our weapons, they'll detect it immediately. Based on their tactical doctrines, they'll interpret that as a prelude to attack and respond accordingly." "How would they respond, sir?" Vextar looked at the data they had gathered about human military doctrine, a species that viewed warfare as science, that specialized in fighting superior enemies, that would escalate conflicts to any level necessary to achieve victory. "They would ensure that we couldn't attack them," he said finally, "either by disabling our weapons systems, destroying our ship, or calling in reinforcements to overwhelm us. And we don't know which option they would choose?" "No," Vextar admitted. "But based on everything we've learned about them, they've probably prepared for all three possibilities." The human vessel continued its evasive maneuvers, broadcasting data and running combat simulations. A species that had turned warfare into art, science, and philosophy all rolled into one. A species that had spent thousands of years learning how to defeat enemies, exactly like the Zalathi. "Sir," Zalnek said quietly, "what are your orders?" Vexitar stared at the screen for a long moment. Everything about this encounter had exceeded their expectations and challenged their assumptions. They had come looking for primitive prey and found apex predators instead. "Continue monitoring," he ordered, "and prepare for the possibility that we may need to withdraw." "Withdraw, sir?" his weapons officer asked in surprise. "From a single primitive vessel?" Vextar turned to look at his weapons officer. "That's no primitive vessel. That's a warship crewed by a species that has been preparing for this moment for thousands of years." Aboard the UHSF Indomitable, Captain Sarah Chen stood calmly on the bridge, watching her crew work with practiced efficiency. The bridge was smaller than the Zalathi Command Center, designed for functionality rather than displays of power. Every surface served a purpose. Every system was built for reliability under extreme conditions. "Contact bearing 127 Mark 15, range approximately 50,000 kilometers, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the sensor station. "Profile matches theoretical alien vessel configuration, estimated mass 2.3 million tons, energy signature consistent with advanced fusion power systems." "Thank you, Torres," Chen replied calmly. Her voice carried the quiet authority that came from 20 years in the human defense fleet. "Time since initial detection?" 2 hours, 14 minutes, Captain, and they still don't know we've spotted them?" "Negative, Captain. They're maintaining their scanning pattern and position. No evasive maneuvers or changes in energy output." Chen nodded. The aliens had made their first mistake by assuming their scanning technology was undetectable. Humanity had learned long ago that in warfare, the side that saw first usually won. Every human ship carried passive sensor arrays specifically designed to detect scanning attempts no matter how sophisticated. "Lieutenant Hayes," she called to the communications officer. "Signal status?" "Data packet transmitted successfully, Captain. Fleet Command, Titan Station, and all ships within 50 light years have been notified of the contact. We're receiving acknowledgement signals now. Response time estimates? Fast response squadron from Titan Station can be here in 6 hours. Full battle group in 18 hours if needed." Chen allowed herself a small smile. 6 hours was cutting it close. But the Indomitable was designed to handle situations exactly like this one. Every human ship was built on the assumption that it might need to fight alone against superior forces until help arrived. "Tactical analysis, Commander Park?" Executive Officer Commander Park looked up from his console where he'd been running. "Combat simulations for the past hour." The alien vessel significantly outmasses us, Captain. Estimated weapons and shielding capabilities are approximately 3 times our level. In a direct confrontation, our survival chances are less than 15%. And in an indirect confrontation? Much better, Captain. Their scanning patterns suggest they're not familiar with human military doctrine. They appear to be conducting a standard first contact scan, looking for technology levels and biological data, which tells us what about their intentions. They're treating us as a potential conquest target, Captain. Their positioning and scanning protocols match theoretical patterns for species that subjugate primitive civilizations. Chen nodded grimly. It was what they had expected, but hoped to avoid. Humanity's expansion into space had been driven partly by the knowledge that the galaxy was a dangerous place. Every human military officer had studied the theoretical possibility of encountering hostile aliens with superior technology. Weapon status, Lieutenant Patel? All systems nominal, Captain. Point defense grid online and calibrated for unknown energy weapon configurations. Missile tubes loaded with adaptive warheads. Railguns charged and targeted. Electronic warfare suite ready for deployment. Countermeasure status? All systems. Ready, Captain. Decoy drones prepared for launch. Chaff dispensers loaded. Electronic jammers calibrated for multiple frequency ranges. Stealth coding is active and functioning normally. Chen walked to the main viewing screen, studying the tactical display that showed both ships' positions. The alien vessel was maintaining a fixed position, continuing its deep scans while apparently unaware it had been detected. Analysis of their scanning technology, Torres? Very sophisticated, Captain. Much more advanced than ours. But it appears to be primarily focused on passive analysis. They're reading our hull composition, internal structure, biological signatures, and computer systems. Computer systems? Yes, Captain. They've penetrated our outer data networks. However, all classified information is stored in isolated systems as per security protocols. They're only accessing publicly available databases, which includes historical records, technical manuals for older systems, basic tactical doctrines, and general information about human civilization. Chen frowned. They're learning about our military history? Yes, Captain. All publicly available information about human conflicts, weapon development, and tactical evolution. Commander Park, assessment? Park pulled up his analysis on the main screen. Captain, if they're studying our military history, they're about to get a very different picture of humanity than their initial scans suggested. Explain. Their biological scans would have told them we're physically weaker than most species, relatively short-lived, and from a low-gravity world. Standard xenobiology would classify us as non-threatening, but our military history shows something very different. Exactly, Captain. Any species that studies human warfare is going to discover that we've been fighting continuously for our entire recorded history. Not just external enemies, but each other. And we've gotten very good at it. Chen nodded. Human military history was a double-edged sword in first contact situations. It would quickly disabuse aliens of any notion that humans were easy prey, but it might also mark humanity as a threat to be eliminated. Captain, Torres called out urgently, I'm detecting changes in the alien vessel's behavior. They're adjusting their scanning parameters and increasing power output. They're taking a closer look at our data? Yes, Captain. And their energy. Patterns suggest increased activity on their bridge. I think they're starting to understand what they're looking at. Chen moved to the tactical station and studied the readouts. The alien ship's scanning intensity had increased dramatically, and their power systems showed signs of increased activity. They were definitely paying more attention to the human vessel than they had been initially. Time to make a decision, she said quietly. Commander Park, initiate first contact protocols. Option 3. Option 3. Aye, Captain. Option 3 was the protocol for potentially hostile first contact with technologically superior aliens. It was designed to demonstrate human capabilities without immediately escalating to combat. More importantly, it was designed to make aliens think twice about their assumptions. "All stations, prepare for tactical demonstration," Park announced. "Execute on my mark." Chen watched the readouts carefully. In 5 seconds, the Indomitable would reveal that it was much more than the primitive vessel the aliens thought they were scanning. Mark. The change was immediate and dramatic. The Indomitable's stealth systems deactivated, revealing its true energy signature. Point defense systems powered up, weapons came online, and the ship's electronic warfare suite began active scanning of the alien vessel. "Full active sensor sweep initiated," Torres reported. "We're scanning them now, Captain. Their hull composition, internal structure, weapons capabilities, everything. Jamming their communications and sensors," added Hayes. "They're now as blind as we want them to be." "Weapons locked on target," Patel confirmed. "Railguns targeted. On their bridge, missile tubes targeted on their power systems, and point defense calibrated to intercept their weapons." Chen studied the tactical display with satisfaction. In 30 seconds, the Indomitable had gone from appearing to be a helpless target to demonstrating that it was a very dangerous opponent. "Analysis of their vessel, Torres." "Advanced technology as expected, Captain, but with some interesting weaknesses. Their armor is designed primarily to stop energy weapons. Our kinetic weapons should be quite effective. Their shields appear to be single frequency, not adaptive. And their weapons are primarily energy-based with limited kinetic options." "Tactical assessment, Commander Park?" "They're designed to fight enemies with similar technology, Captain. Energy weapons, energy shields, predictable tactics. They're not prepared for our hybrid approach." "Which is?" "Kinetic weapons to penetrate their shields, adaptive countermeasures to neutralize their advantages, and tactical doctrines they won't expect." Chen nodded. This was exactly the scenario human military doctrine had been designed for. Superior alien technology countered by human adaptability and unconventional thinking. "Captain," Hayes called out, "I'm detecting communication attempts from the alien vessel. They're trying to establish contact. Can you understand them?" "Working on it, Captain. Their language structure is complex, but our translation algorithms are making progress. I should have basic communication capability in a few minutes." "What's the tone of their transmissions?" "Difficult to say without full translation, Captain, but the frequency and urgency suggest surprise and concern. I don't think they expected us to respond this way." Chen allowed herself a small smile. Few species expected humans to respond the way they did to threats. Most species either submitted immediately or fought back using predictable tactics. Humans had developed a third option: demonstrate that they were much more dangerous than they appeared. "Captain," Torres reported, "the alien vessel is backing away from us. Slowly, but they're definitely increasing distance." "Defensive posture?" "Unknown, Captain. Their weapons are powering up, but they haven't targeted us yet. It looks like they're preparing for multiple possibilities." "Smart of them," Chen said, approvingly. "Commander Park, what's our next move?" "Standard protocol calls for demonstrating our communications capability, Captain. Show them we can understand their transmissions and respond appropriately. And if they respond aggressively, then we show them why that would be a mistake." Chen studied the tactical situation. The alien ship was larger, more powerful, and more advanced than the Indomitable. But it was also alone, far from support, and facing an enemy that didn't follow their expectations. More importantly, human reinforcements were on the way. "Captain," Hayes announced, "translation matrix complete. I can now understand their communications." "What are they saying?" "They're debating their options, Captain. Some want to withdraw, others want to demand our surrender, and at least one voice is arguing for immediate attack." "And their decision?" "Still unknown, Captain. But their tone suggests they're beginning to understand that this isn't a routine first contact situation." Chen nodded. The next few minutes would determine whether this encounter ended in peaceful communication or violent confrontation. But either way, the aliens now knew that humanity wasn't the easy target they had expected. All stations maintain readiness, she ordered, and prepare for whatever comes next. The two ships faced each other across the void of space, one massive and powerful, the other smaller but surprisingly dangerous, both crews waiting to see what the other would do next, and both beginning to understand that this first contact would be remembered for a very long time. The standoff lasted for 17 minutes. Captain Vexistar stared at the human vessel on his screen, no longer seeing a primitive patrol ship, but recognizing it for what it truly was. A warship crewed by apex predators who had just demonstrated that they were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "Captain," Communications Officer Veltar said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. They're using our own communication protocols." "They've learned our language?" Vextar asked, though he was no longer surprised by anything these humans could do. "More than that, sir. They're speaking perfect High Zalathi, using proper military terminology and diplomatic formalities. It's like they've been studying our communications for years." "Play the message." The bridge speakers filled with a calm, measured voice speaking. Flawless High Zalathi with only the slightest accent. "Greetings, Captain Vextar of the Zalathi vessel Dominion's Edge. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Star Forces vessel Indomitable. We have been monitoring your presence for the past 2 hours and 27 minutes. We wish to establish peaceful communication and avoid any misunderstandings that might lead to unnecessary conflict." The bridge fell silent. The human captain had not only learned their language in a matter of minutes, but she knew the name of their ship and their captain. Most disturbing of all, she had been aware of their presence from the very beginning. "How did they—" Vextar began, then stopped. It didn't matter how they had done it. What mattered was that they had. "Should I respond, Captain?" Veltar asked. "Yes," Vextar decided. "Open a channel." The main screen shifted to show the interior of the human bridge. Captain Chen stood calmly in the center, surrounded by her crew who worked with quiet efficiency at their stations. She was smaller than any Zalathi, appearing almost fragile by their standards, but her eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had faced death and come through stronger. "Captain Vextar," she said with a slight nod of respect. "Thank you for responding. I trust you've had time to review the information your scans have gathered about my species." "We have," Vextar replied carefully, "and I admit the data has been educational." "I imagine it has. Your scanning technology is quite impressive, much more advanced than ours. However, I should point out that what you've scanned represents only publicly available information about human civilization, meaning that our actual military capabilities are significantly more extensive than what your scans would indicate. The Indomitable is indeed a light patrol vessel, as your analysis correctly determined. However, our definition of light patrol vessel may differ somewhat from yours." Vextar looked at the data they had gathered. If this was a light patrol vessel, what did human heavy warships look like, Captain Chen? He said formally. "Are you threatening us?" "Not at all, Captain. I'm simply ensuring that we both have accurate information before we proceed. Your initial scans classified my species as primitive and potentially hostile. I wanted to correct that assessment." "And how would you classify your species, Captain?" Chen was quiet for a moment, seemingly considering her words carefully. "Cautious, Captain Vextar. We've learned from experience that the galaxy can be a dangerous place for unprepared species." "Experience?" "We've encountered hostile aliens before, Captain. Not in person, but we've found evidence of species that didn't survive their first contact with technologically superior civilizations. We've studied those encounters carefully and prepared accordingly. The implications were chilling. Humanity had found evidence of species that had been exterminated by aliens, and had used that knowledge to prepare for their own eventual first contact." "Captain," Vextar said slowly, "what are your intentions regarding the Zalathi Confederation?" "That depends entirely on your intentions regarding humanity, Captain. We prefer peaceful coexistence with our neighbors. However, we're fully prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. And how exactly would you defend yourselves against superior technology? Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested that she had been hoping he wouldn't ask that question. The same way we've always defended ourselves, Captain, through superior tactics, strategic thinking, and the willingness to escalate a conflict to whatever level necessary to ensure our survival. Escalation? If attacked, we don't simply defend ourselves, Captain. We eliminate the threat completely. Our military doctrine is based on the principle that any enemy capable of attacking us once will attempt to do so again unless permanently deterred. Vextar felt a chill run down his spine. You would destroy an entire civilization. If that civilization posed an existential threat to humanity, yes. We've learned that half measures in warfare tend to lead to longer, more destructive conflicts. When we fight to win decisively. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. This small, fragile-looking human was calmly discussing the complete destruction of civilizations as if it were a standard military option. Captain, Vextar said carefully, surely you realize that your technology is inferior to ours. How could you possibly threaten a civilization like ours? Captain Vextar, with respect, you're thinking like someone who has always enjoyed technological superiority. When you've spent thousands of years fighting enemies with better weapons, you learn to think differently. Explain. We don't need to match your technology, Captain. We just need to make the cost of conquering us higher than the potential benefits. There are many ways to do that. Such as? Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment. Do you really want to know, Captain? Vexitar considered the question. Part of him did want to know, if only to satisfy his curiosity, but a larger part suspected that the answer would be deeply disturbing. Perhaps another time, he said finally. Wise choice. Captain Chen agreed. Now, shall we discuss more pleasant topics, such as establishing peaceful relations between our species? You would be willing to establish peaceful relations after this demonstration? Captain, this wasn't a demonstration of hostility. This was a demonstration of capability. There's a difference. We wanted to ensure that any future relationship between our species is based on mutual respect, rather than misconceptions about relative strength. Vextar studied the human captain's face. She was clearly intelligent, well-trained, and completely confident in her abilities. More importantly, she seemed genuinely interested in peaceful relations, despite having just proven that humanity was far more dangerous than they appeared. What would you propose? He asked. A simple arrangement, Captain. We'll share our space peacefully. We won't interfere with Zalathi activities in your territory, and you don't interfere with human activities in ours. If our species encounter each other in neutral space, we'll treat such meetings as opportunities for trade and cultural exchange rather than potential conflicts. And if conflicts do arise, then we'll resolve them through negotiation whenever possible. But both sides should understand that forcing a military solution would be expensive for everyone involved. Vextar looked around his bridge at his crew. They all wore the same expression he imagined was on his own face, the look of predators who had just discovered they weren't at the top of the food chain after all. Captain Chen, he said finally, I think I speak for the Zalathi Confederation when I say that we find your proposal reasonable. Excellent, she replied, with what appeared to be genuine relief. I'll transmit our formal first contact protocols and suggested diplomatic frameworks. I think you'll find them quite comprehensive. Captain, Science Officer Zalnex whispered urgently. I'm detecting multiple energy signatures approaching from the direction of human space. Vextar looked at Captain Chen, who smiled slightly. Ah, that would be our fast response squadron. 6 heavy cruisers and 2 battleships. They should arrive within the hour. You called for reinforcements? Standard protocol for first contact situations, Captain. We always ensure that any potential misunderstandings can be resolved quickly and decisively. 8 human warships were approaching, including vessels that Captain Chen had classified as battleships. If a light patrol vessel could hold its own against the Dominion's edge, what could actual human warships do? Captain Chen, Vextar said slowly, I believe the Zalathi Confederation would very much like to establish peaceful relations with humanity. I was hoping you'd say that, Captain. I think this could be the beginning of a very productive relationship. As the human reinforcements approached and the 2 captains began discussing the framework for peaceful coexistence, word of the encounter was already spreading throughout Zalathi space. Within hours, every ship captain in the Confederation fleet would know about the species that looked primitive but fought like demons, that turned warfare into science, and that could hold their own against superior technology through sheer tactical brilliance. The galaxy had a new apex predator, and its name was humanity. But perhaps more importantly, it was an apex predator that preferred cooperation to conquest, that would rather trade than fight, and that offered friendship to those wise enough to accept it. Captain Vextar looked at the approaching human fleet and realized that this first contact would indeed be remembered for a very long time, not as the day the Zalathi discovered another primitive species to conquer, but as the day they learned that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that don't look dangerous at all. The Indomitable continued its patrol, its crew unaware that they had just redefined the balance of power in their sector of the galaxy. Captain Chen returned to her duties, satisfied that another potential conflict had been resolved through a show of strength rather than actual violence, and across known space, the word began to spread. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again.